Hello, everyone. I'm Ann Wallen, and I'm here with Henci Goer today. She is the author of so many books, but one that we're going to talk about today is her latest in a series. It's called um, Labor Induction. The why, let me grab it really quick. The why, when, and how. And she has another book too that we already use. If you are a MaternityWise doula, you know that the labor pain book is part of our required reading. So how about
Well,
we,
that's happy to hear.
yeah, well, how about we get into a little more about who you are? Because I'm not sure that everyone is going to know just exactly who you are and how you got into this. Do you mind giving us a little intro?
Sure. Well, I'm just wondering how far back to go because I've been doing this for over 40 years now or something like it. All right. It actually all started with the difference in the birth experience between my first and second child. My first birth was a pretty uneventful vaginal birth from the medical point of view, and it left me really in a not a good place because basically, as I found out later, I had a whole bunch of interventions that weren't necessary, but really made for a negative birth experience. And I ended up with postpartum depression, which went on for months. So when I was pregnant with my second child, there were three altogether, but my second child, we moved to California. And at that point, I knew I wanted something very different. I wanted a home birth in the hospital. I did not realize in 1977 that it was possible to have a home birth at home. Um, but I found this great obstetrician, and I had, well, I think the easiest way to give it as a nugget is in the first birth, the doctor delivered the baby. He cut um, a large episiotomy and pulled her out with forceps. And when I instinctively, I had a saddle block, which is the dumbest anesthesia going because they don't give it to you until you're ready to push. It's like, what, it does. Um, and I instinctively reached out for him. My first child is a boy, and was restrained by the cuffs on the delivery table. And it was like, don't touch, this is a sterile, field. My second birth, oh, and I was talked into having a narcotic, which did no good because now I had taken Lamaze classes, but now because I was so fuzzed out um, by the opioid that I just couldn't, you know, so it did no good. So come to the second birth, and I got to the difficult part. Um, I got to, well, she was posterior. So when I tried to start, my back didn't bother me much during the dilation phase, but when I got to pushing, it was excruciating. And there was no break. It was back pain, not the contractions. And I was like, I can't do this. I can't do this. And everybody around me said, yes, you can. You can do this. Um, and my doctor did a manual version. Do you people know what that is? And then once she turned around, um, she sort of came right down with the next push. And he said, he kind of helped the head out. And he said, you want the baby? Pull the baby up. So I reached down and I pulled what turned out to be my daughter up onto my chest. And she proceeded to push herself up on her arms and look me in the face, which was like, hello. She's been like that ever since. um, and I was on top of the world. I fell in love with her immediately, whereas it was a very long, slow period for my son because of my own internal experience of having him. Um, I remember taking a shower the next day and just loving my body. Women hate their bodies, their boobs are too small or their behind is too big or whatever it is. And I was like, it had done this amazing thing. I had done this amazing thing. So I came out of that wanting to teach other women and birthing people. Um, so I decided to become a Lamaze teacher, which I did. And I also got involved with a freestanding birth center. And they was a community owned and operated birth center. And one of the things that they did was they provided what was like, this is now 1980, a doula, which was a brand new concept. There were no doula organizations at that time. They were just, like the concept was out there because Marshall Klaus and Phyllis Klaus and John Cannell had been doing this research. Um, and that was transformational. I mean, just being present at births and realizing what that support meant. So I was a doula as well, and I became a Lamaze teacher, started teaching classes. I was always interested in writing. I had a major in biology, so I sort of had like mainstream kind of knowledge. And so I was writing my handouts and I was reading because I was very interested in the research. And and I was just hearing statements from my students that just did not jive with the research.
Mm.
Like, well, of course you have to have continuous monitoring. You don't have continue. That would be like driving your car down the wrong side of the road at 90 miles an hour, literally. I mean, I remember that. Um,
Wow.
so I got into writing, and at this point, Penny Simkin, may her memory be a blessing, was running Penny Press. And I literally wrote to her and said, I'd like to write for you. And,
Aw.
and I also started writing for, there was a Childbirth Educator magazine. And so I got into writing. And then I got out of being a Lamaze teacher and I got out of being a doula. Why? Because there was such a gap. I mean,
Mm.
my students were coming to me at this point because they wanted a little something to do before they got their epidural. And I felt like that's not what I wanted to teach them about. And I
Yeah.
felt like I was watching them lie down on a railroad track. And I'm like, the train's coming. Do you hear the whistle? Do you see the bright light? That train is coming down the track. Oh, my
Yeah.
doctor only does cesareans when they're necessary.
Mm.
And then and more or less the same thing with being a doula, in that I would be at births where I felt like I couldn't do anything to make it the birth it should be. And I knew from the births that we were doing at the birth center, even with transfers to the hospital where there was respect, where the doctor might turn to me and say, okay, I've tried do you have any ideas to help her make progress? I mean, where there was a recognition that there are different sets of skills and that they can all come together to make for the best birth for the mother. Um, but I would be at births where it's like, I've heard the epidurals could slow down my labor. Oh no, it'll speed it up. Or where I knew that she was not being treated as she should be, but she was okay with it because she didn't know the difference.
Yeah.
So at that point, I'm like, so I'm teaching and I'm not giving people what they're paying me for because I want them to have something different. But that's not a good place for them or for me.
Right.
And the same thing at births, where I really honor the doulas that can stay in the trenches. But it wasn't, again, it's not good for the mom in labor if I can't be present in the way that she needs, you know,
Yeah. It's
and
really
and I
hard.
and I felt like I could make it better for her.
Yeah.
So at that point, I had gotten into writing, and that gave me a path where I could stay with my passion and yet not be and be in a much better spot, both for me and because I had a skill that not that many people have. I'm not the only one out there who's writing about what the research has to say, but I am sort of like, well, for many years, Penny Simkin was that person. And then Penny kind of went in a different direction because she got very involved with when survivors give birth and trauma and it was like, so I sort of like, but I can do that. So that's where I've been for the last 40 years, is writing
I love
books.
hearing that. I love hearing that because that is how I know you, Henci. Like I know you from the Thinking Woman's Guide. Like that was the
Yeah.
first book from so long ago. I remember that when it was one of my favorite books. I used to give it to all my clients. And now you've got this great series coming out, and I know you as this amazing,
Oh, thank
you
you.
have this skill. You have this skill where, and not a lot of people can do this, but I endeavor to try to be like you, because you have this skill where you can take complex scientific, statistical, whatever information and break it down to make it make sense for the regular person. So you don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand what is the evidence telling us. You have a way of being able to really clearly explain it and make it, you know, actionable or usable by the everyday person. And that is something that's really missing in all of medical care, but especially I think birth, because we as a society tend to look at medical doctors as kind of like the experts, right? And we don't want to step on any toes, and we don't want to pretend like we know something because they're the expert, right? And it's perpetuated by their attitudes sometimes. You'll hear doctors say, "Oh, where did you read that? Dr. Google?" And it's like, well, that's probably where you read it too. So they there's a kind of a separation of trust in the body, trust in the medical system, but then what is the information telling us? What are we learning from, the evidence, from statistics, from even just anecdotal, like your own personal experience saying, I went through this and then I went through this and this is how it was different. And now I know that this is how it could be different. And there's certain things that happened along the way that changed your own outcome, right? And so I think also as women, we share our stories and we have to continue to do that, but we share our stories, and that's also a form of learning that we do. But unless there's science to back it up, sometimes people don't want to follow what someone says because it's just their experience, right?
Well, let me tell you about a shift I've made with the new book, or
Yeah.
the new books from
Okay.
Thinking Woman's Guide. And I think it has to come at least partly with getting older. Um, and I think it's important for your audience as well. So when I wrote the Thinking Woman's Guide, that was published in 1999, what I realized when I came to be conceptualizing the Take Charge of Your Birth series was that it was kind of a TED Talk. In other words, I'm going to stand up here on a stage in front of you, and I'm going to tell you what I know that you may not know. It's just insane. What I came to, and partly this was mentoring by Penny Simkin, who is, I miss her very much, um, is that you don't know what's right for that woman or birthing person. So I did a lot of work with my editor publisher, who also happens to be my third child, my daughter, and who is also the audiobook narrator, because that's what her profession is. She's a professional audiobook narrator on both books, but that's sort of a fun fact. And what came out of those conversations from looking at other books that were written, it's like, well, I'm not going to write, I didn't want to do another Thinking Woman's Guide. I didn't want to do an Emily Oster, kind of like, I'm your girlfriend. This happened to me. I've got some stuff for you. That's
Right.
not me either. What I came to was the place I wanted to come from was to make, if you're an adult, if you have the information that you need, you can decide what's right for you. So that's principle number one. So let's sit down at a table, both have our cup of tea, and let's talk about like what I know that could be helpful and be put into your service. And whatever that decision is, I want you, my books have always had a takeaway because from a long time ago, an article I wrote for an editor said, you don't just give people information if you don't tell them what they can do with it. So my takeaway has always made no assumptions on what people are going to do with it. If you look at the induction book,
Yeah.
it has a whole chapter on what the research has to say about ways, how to conduct an induction that will enable it to be most likely to go smoothly. And I don't, it's like, yes, part of me wants to say, the part of me that would make decisions for myself would be like, I would only have an induction if it were medically indicated, like I had high blood pressure or whatever. But it's like, I don't care what you want. I just want you to have the accurate information and understand the pros and cons of your options so that you are making an informed choice. And that's where I interact with the system. Because the system, and there's evidence for this, the system, when you get into discussions, your care provider, if they're the typical care provider, are more likely than not to not give you a balanced picture. Now,
Mm-hmm.
here's another thing that people need to know. There's no such thing as unbiased because everybody's got an opinion, including me. So and these are topics that are controversial, like, is epidural the best thing to do, or should we be inducing at 39 weeks? So if you can't be unbiased, here's what you can be, and here's what I've done in the books, is you can be transparent.
And I love your voice in that way in the books. I love that because it also makes us feel like, as the reader, just as feedback, as the reader, we feel, or I feel, almost like it's more safe to listen to what you have to say because you're
Exactly.
being transparent.
No judgment zone.
Right. And that's the doula heart, right? That's your doula heart coming through. I can hear that because really, as a doula, we shouldn't be walking away from a birth and getting so jaded because the birth didn't go the way we thought it should go, right? We should be able to have our own boundaries and say, well, this is what
Yeah.
I would do, but this is your birth and you get to do what you want to do. And that's really hard sometimes, especially if you know it can be really different.
Well, here's a problem for doulas that they need to be very mindful of. A lot of doulas get into the work because they had a negative experience and they want to make it better for other
Yeah.
mothers. But they need to be very careful about making assumptions. There is no right way of doing things. And I
Yeah.
think some of that I learned from my doula work. I went to a birth with a mother, she started out at the birth center. It was her third baby. She popped out big babies within, a couple of hours of like being in active labor. This one was different.
Yeah.
Um, let's see if I want to give away the ending first. Even she said after she got stuck at like 8 centimeters, she said, this is different. I'm hurting in a different way. And we transferred to the hospital. And in full, conversation, it's like she decided, did she decide on an epidural? No, let's get to the point that was really important. She finally, I think she did have an epidural, and that allowed, because she was in so much pain that she couldn't relax.
Right.
Um, so she got to fully dilated, and then she started pushing. And we tried different, and finally this lovely nurse said, I normally wouldn't suggest this, but can we try putting her on her back and having her pull her legs up to her ears? Like everything that we've been told, you don't want to do that. You want the mother upright. Um,
Mhm.
and and that baby came out. And it turned out what they speculated, because he had sort of is that it had been like this.
Mm.
And when they flipped whatever it was, it's like you cannot make assumptions. There is no
Yeah.
right way. There's a careful and thoughtful way. But where was I going with this? I think the thing for the doulas who have gotten into it because they had a particular type of negative experience and they want it to be different
Yeah.
is to be very conscious of their own biases.
Mhm.
If they're like, a lot of doulas would prefer to attend unmedicated births and have good reasons for that because they know all the problems that epidurals can cause that their clients don't. And that's not, you know, that can translate into, well, now she has an epidural, I don't need to take care of her.
Right. And that is why we developed the epidoula training that we do. And
Ah,
it's part of our labor program, but it's all about understanding how does the epidural work, but also, and more importantly, how to help reduce the complications that come along with the epidural. And the main one being, you can't just let her lay there. There's specific
right.
movements that you can be doing with her body, and you can be simulating her, you know, activeness that she would be. But now you have this relaxed body that you can do some of these movements with, and even like a simulated squat or different things in the bed that she probably couldn't have tolerated if she
Well,
didn't.
she can get into a real squat with today's modern epidural. She just needs spotters.
Yeah, exactly. So just understanding that the epidural is not the enemy and it can keep you on track for a vaginal birth if you know how to keep being a doula once it's been used. So that's
Right.
our
The
that's
other thing is that once women have an epidural, they or birthing people, they may be more likely to be anxious and needing support around that
yeah,
because
because they
um
feel like if they fail
because
or
y- well, yeah, and because they may have some of its side effects or it's anyway,
mhm,
it's complicated. I
yeah,
want to go back to one thing you said about the Thinking Woman's Guide being a great book that you used to give to clients.
yeah,
I think these new books, the labor pain, what's your best strategy, and the induction book, one of my hopes is that doulas and childbirth educators will give them to clients because it's kind of a built-in, don't have to have this knowledge. You don't have to make assumptions about what they want. You can if you make that part of your package, now you can have a discussion in which you're equals because you're not holding power by having information that they may not have. And even better, you're not in the position of contradicting what her doctor may be telling her. So we've
right.
tried to make that easy, which is you can get them you can buy the books in bulk at 20% off list. And we can talk more about the details of that later because Amazon
Yeah.
won't let you do that, but we've set up a way where people can.
We will have at the bottom, or you all who are viewing this now, you'll see it at the bottom underneath this video box. You'll see links and you'll see more information on where to go to get those books at a discounted rate, bulk, um, and so many more. But I have a few kind of pointed questions. Can we
Okay, let's go.
questions? So we have a highly medicated or a highly interventive medical system, right? Why do you feel like we are treating birth this way?
Ah, well, it almost, there's a parallel here between the doula that wants the best for her client, thinking that she knows what's best, and because our system is more or less led by obstetricians, also thinking the same thing, that they know what's best. And why do they do that? Well, it's because we have the wrong person in charge of normal birth. The people we've put in charge of normal birth are surgical specialists in the pathology of women's reproductive organs. So they are going to start from the premise of something can go wrong at any minute, even when everything is looking fine.
Yes.
My job is to prevent that. Well, how do I do that? Well, you can't trust this process. You cannot trust that bodies are able to birth babies. So
Right.
my job is to be vigilantly monitoring. And if I see any departure from this very narrow range of what I think is, what the research says is normal, that I need to jump in and do something. So if it's a labor that isn't progressing quickly, well, we need to get those contractions going stronger. And if that doesn't work, then we need to do a cesarean. And if anything sort of like blips or makes us worry about the least little bit about this baby's condition, um, and never mind the fact that some of those changes in the fetal heart rate are the baby showing that it adapts to the stress of this, of labor. But if anything is going wrong, rescue that baby because you can't trust this mother's body to birth this baby. So that's the primary problem that I call, you not me, just other people too. That's the medical approach. The
Yes.
problem with the blinders on that is that it only considers the positive, like you can rescue a baby. It never considers the harm you're doing by interfering with a normal physiologic process.
Yeah.
And that is the underpinning of the medical approach.
Do you feel like the medical approach is like more of a masculine view of the feminine process? I know that's kind of off on
Yes
a
and
tangent, but
no,
okay.
because certainly there are midwives who have it. So
That's,
it's not a matter of the gender of the person who is in practice.
I mean,
And
systemically.
and women obstetricians have it too.
Yeah.
They I don't know if there's been any recent research, but there was some earlier that basically their approach to trying to get you to agree with them was different, but they still were coming from the same place. So it was less, and who do you think you are? And it was more like, gee, I must not have explained it well enough. Let me try again. you know, but
Right.
nonetheless, coming from the same space. And also, I think it's tricky at this point to make assumptions because I think there are an awful lot of people who gender identify as women who buy that same model,
Yeah.
who um, years ago, I I wonder if I'm digressing too far. I went to a conference of what was then by the National Advocates for Pregnant Women, who were about reproductive rights, including reproductive rights during pregnancy and birth. And I spoke about cesareans and the problems with cesareans. And the audience was not receptive because they thought an elective cesarean was the right of every woman. So I think there are a lot of women out there who are just fine with the system because they bought into that same, if you want to call it a more feminine model of, they have bought into the more masculine model of efficiency, rapidity,
Right.
no mess, no,
Right. Right.
whatever.
Yeah.
And they think that puts them more in control of the process, and they're really much more comfortable with that. Because one thing about, the classic feminine is it's messy and it's unpredictable and it's organic. And it's like, so
And masculine is
that's why I said
very,
yes and no,
yeah.
you know? I
And the
mean,
masculine we see is like I feel almost like the entire medical system has kind of got a masculine approach because the
yeah,
masculine is more like point A to point B, straightest, most efficient, quickest way to get there. Right. Whereas women, like you said, we're messy. We kind of, we might take tangents. It's not always a direct route,
yeah,
especially with birth.
right. And don't forget too, we're not just talking male doctor, we're
Right.
talking surgeon. And what is at the root of the surgical personality? You fix it by cutting it out, you know?
Yes.
And
Yeah,
then, of course, it expands to the larger structure, which supports this model. So when you
mm,
move it into an institution, then efficiency means throughput. You're getting,
right,
which means time limits, which
right.
means, you know, a whole bunch of things.
Yeah.
Or then you get into defensive medicine with like, you know, the classic, I never regretted the cesarean I did. I regretted some cesareans I didn't do.
Yeah.
And the problem and the problems with that.
And there,
Although what Marston Wagner said is about, you know, about getting sued is if you're going to play God, you're going to get blamed for natural disasters.
oh, I like that quote.
Yeah.
But really, I mean, it's also in the way they're educated. I know so many OBs who have told me, you know, they're trained in fear. They're really trained
Yes.
in fear. So when they're not taught to trust the process, right? They're trained to fear the process. They're trained to fear all the things that could go wrong. And I feel like it kind of goes back to this, you know, can we trust a woman? Period.
No, this
And
is all part of a patriarchal society, and we have not escaped that yet. I mean, just
uh,
kind of read your news, you know, it's still with us,
it,
alive and well. Women's brains are, you know, not big enough for love, but not for thought, which, by the way, is a quote from somebody in the 1800s.
well, now you mentioned in your book, if I can go back, um, and you mentioned medical philosophy a minute ago. Can you kind of explain what are the philosophies behind medical and physiological?
Well, we pretty much talked about what's driving the medical approach. It
Hmm.
starts from the premise that something can go wrong at any moment, and you
Right.
can see where it will go from there naturally.
Yep.
The other approach is the physiologic approach. It starts from the premise that um, for almost all of us, we're built to do this and things will go well. And the problems that arise can, you know, more like catching a cold, can be resolved by simple measures, maybe talking out anxieties, getting people up and moving, whatever, can be resolved by simple measures or just having more patience. And yes, there will be a certain percentage that represents something more serious where intervention is indicated. But the mother is always, the laboring woman or birthing person is always at the center of it and is always fully participating
Right.
in both the decisions, but also in helping themselves. In other words, it's the laboring person that gets up and gets moving, or says, you know, I just want to. Oh, could somebody just press on my back? I mean, that really trust their inner wisdom as well as the skill of the person that is attending them. There's a big difference between attending a birth and delivering a baby.
Yes. Yes, I totally agree. And I think it's good also to kind of Carol Gauchi, she is very big on like personal responsibility,
Mm.
right? So she always talks about that and about how if you're going to have a home birth, if you're going to have, you know, whatever kind of birth that you're going to have, you need to be responsible for the preparation for that birth. So, you know, being able to really get to know your body while you're still pregnant so that when you're in labor, you can identify those signals that are saying something's really not right. Or, yeah, like, can someone push here? Or I need a drink, or I just got to get out of this position, or whatever it is. And so I think that that's really important to be able to, you know, not just tell her, oh, you need to drink, but allow her to, or hopefully she has, you know, gotten to know her own body and been able to honor her own signals so she can hear herself. Because you're right, like when we're, I've been to so many births. I could look at a mom and probably tell you approximately where she's at in her labor and maybe what she needs next or whatever. But that's not what matters. What matters is where does she want to be? Like, what does she need? What does she feel like she wants next? Not necessarily what I think. And, I've been to plenty of births and I don't take it personally, but I've been to plenty of births where I'm pressing on someone's back in a certain way and I'm convinced that this is what they need. And they say, not there, or not that hard, or whatever, and as the doula, you got to back up and do what it is that they want, or not do, or stop doing what you were doing, but being able to let them be in charge of their experience.
That is a key thing, agency.
Mm-hmm.
And it enters into being prepared. It also enters into understanding that ultimately it's always your decision. You may make the decision to turn that decision over to your care provider.
Right.
That's a perfectly legitimate decision.
Mm-hmm.
Where, again, where my books come in is where you're doing it because you don't know you have another option, or you
Right.
want to make sure that you're working with a care provider who's going to listen to you, or you're working with a care provider who you can trust to make decisions that you don't know enough about because you've already established you're on the same page about the approach that's being taken.
Yeah.
And agency, I have a friend who was a marriage and family counselor who specialized in perinatal mood disorders. And her thing, what she pointed out that didn't, certainly I experienced a long tail from my uneventful first birth, is that psychological harm that is done lasts a lot longer than the
Yeah.
infection you had that healed, or, like whatever the physical things mostly heal. You, the psychological ones stretch out into your relationship with your partner, how you feel about yourself, your relationship with your baby, in a whole bunch of ways that aren't being considered because those are soft outcomes. In,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there is a lot of research around that. But again, the medical approach is after a live mother and a live baby in reasonably good physical health, end of story.
Yeah.
But agency comes into play again, and I'm sure your doulas have seen this, when things don't go well, because that's where the possibility for childbirth related psychological trauma comes in. And that enters in not just because it didn't go well, and yes, it could still be that you would be traumatized, by what happened, but it
Mm-hmm.
comes in mostly in how you were treated.
Mm-hmm.
So there again, another reason I wrote those books is to have my readers be in the ability to have agency when the going gets tough.
So I have a question.
Yes.
I know a lot of doulas and even moms have the same question, right? So let's say, for whatever reason, medical or not medical, they have agreed to go and be induced. Do they throw out, like, all their agency and just say, okay, well, I'm being induced now. I'm going to have the roller coaster of, or the snowball of interventions and go on, this, I'm no longer making choices now. Do they lose their agency and do they lose their autonomy when they say yes to an induction?
Hmm. That's not a yes or no question. So I need to unpack that a little bit.
Sorry, I didn't mean to phrase it as a trick question.
No, 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 I didn't. I'm not taking it as a trick question, but there's a more nuanced
Very
answer.
open-ended. Yeah.
So, but we want to start from the point where, for whatever reason, she said yes, she wants to be induced. I think, well, first of all, this is where it really hits the road in terms of, have you chosen the right care provider?
Yeah.
Because when you get to the point of saying yes, you are not, it is their expertise. I mean, you can't say, well, I read in this book that this systematic review that the protocol that you should use for oxytocin is this. It's like you went to a psychiatrist because you were experiencing anxiety and now you're interested in medication, and now you're going to tell the psychiatrist what medication you ought to take and what the dosage should be. I don't think so.
Right.
You still have agency. Well, the first place you have agency is whether or not you agree to the induction. I mean, you can sort of read things all over the place. I get them in my Google alerts that I set to get information that I might want to post on social media of like, my doctor's inducing me next Thursday. It's like, you didn't have a choice. I don't know what to, it's like, well, you could have said no, you know?
That's the
So
first
first of all, you've made that, this is your agency and you made that decision to do that. The second thing would be, this is where you do have agency. You have agency in a couple of spots. One is, and this is in the book, this is where I think I can help people with an induction.
step.
One thing is, if the cervix isn't ready to go, cervical ripening agents don't work. If this is your first baby, if it's your second baby, it's not that, if you've already had a vaginal birth, it's not that big a deal. But with the first baby, they don't work. They do a great job of softening the cervix. They don't do anything to change this excess cesarean rate. If you wait until the cervix is ready, the cesarean rate is about the same as it is if you went into labor spontaneously. So that's one important thing to know. It's like, even if it's a medical induction, now, so the next question is, well, how do I know the cervix isn't ready? Because your care provider can do a vaginal exam and gives you something called the Bishop score, which is a measure of the readiness for labor. And if it is less than 6, say no, unless it's urgent. So that's a question you can ask. It's like, all right, so my blood pressure's a little elevated. We both agreed I need to do this. How urgent is it?
Right.
Okay. That's one thing. The second thing that comes in is I would say don't allow membranes to be ruptured until you're in active labor. The reason for that is once membranes are ruptured, you got on the train, you can't get off. If the induction doesn't work, you're going to have a cesarean. If membranes
Right.
are intact, you can do serial inductions. You can stop, rest, come back the next day. So there are in the situations where you can say yes or no to your doctor, it's like, if it isn't urgent, we're not going to do the induction yet. Or I decline having my membranes ruptured. If I get into active labor and you think that's the thing to do, great, but I decline doing that. The third place where you can say yes or no is time limits. Because
Mhm.
one of the things that happens is an awful lot, and there's evidence on this, I've always got the evidence, that there's an awful lot of cesareans done for failure to progress with an induction where you're still in early labor. So nobody should be talking about, and unless there's something else going on, but nobody should be talking about cesarean for lack of progress until you're in active labor, because early labor can take a long time. And again, you've got that, so let's stop and you'll sleep overnight. And of course, again, then you're getting into, the problem with being in an institution is once you're in, they want you to have the baby.
Yeah.
So those are some points where you don't lose your agency. But it isn't as simple as, it isn't like you get to dictate. I mean, this is like you hired this person because they have a certain body of expertise.
Exactly. And it's still your body. Everything that's going on, unless you're unconscious, everything that's going on, you still have the right to say yes or no, or let's negotiate, or even just, um, you know, help me understand why you're recommending that, right? Just like asking more questions, because sometimes there's a good reason for it, but they're not taking, not all obstetricians or even midwives are good at educating. And so they might just say, this is what we should do, but they're not good at explaining why they believe that's the good thing to do. And then the client is just kind of left there thinking, I'm doing it because they said so. I don't know if that's the right thing to do or not. So being able to kind of help them to get answers to make them, and I don't want to say make them feel better about the decision, but help them to feel more at peace with the decision because they understand the decision.
I go into the BRAIN acronym. Do you use the
Mhm.
BRAIN acronym? Yeah.
Yeah, we
So
actually,
there again, you have
yes,
agency because you have
yeah,
it's like, is this an emergency? No.
yeah,
And by the way, you don't even have to ask that question. If there's an emergency happening, you'll know.
you'll know.
But the BRAIN acronym, which a lot of us use, and I describe what it is, well,
Mhm.
benefits, risks, alternatives, um, instinct or intuition, and no or not now. I go into a description of that for that very reason, to give a structure for having a conversation. And then I can't say strongly enough, you talked about your rights. There are things that are definitely your rights as a patient, and they don't go away because you happen to be a patient with somebody inside of you.
Mhm.
Okay. Um, but that's a very difficult situation, especially if you're um, a person of color, or you are low income, or English isn't your first language, or you're a young person, or you're not heterosexual, or
Mhm.
fill in the blank on that one. So
Okay.
rights are tricky, and there are ways of working with that. But again, I think it's really important to have the right care provider.
And we actually, one of our trainers added an S to the end of brain, and
Did they?
S stands for space. In other words,
What
like S stands for space. So
space?
everybody kind of back up and let the birthing person and their partner think this through, give them a little time, like let them make the decision without pressure. So I really like adding that to the
I
end.
would add to that, actually have that in the description of, like, after you've gotten this information, ask for time alone. And
Mm-hmm.
then what I add to that is, and this is your opportunity, if you have a doula, to talk with your doula about, are there any other questions you want to be asking?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But
because
it's
you're,
important to get them out of the room, because you cannot make an informed decision if you've got a nurse and a doctor standing there like this, waiting for your answer,
mm-hmm.
and not caring even if you're in the middle of a contraction, you know.
I remember
So
back,
that's the other piece, is getting that space. I agree.
yeah, I remember back in the day before we used all the computers that we're using now. I remember talking something through with my client, and she was talking to her partner about what she wanted to do, how she felt about it, and the nurse literally started tapping her clipboard with her pen, standing at the foot of the bed. Just we were like, that's not helpful. So yeah, asking for space, I think is a good, just giving them, a no pressure environment. Now, like you said, if there's an actual emergency going on, you're gonna know it. So there's not time to make decisions and and talk
Right.
through feelings and whatever in that kind of scenario. But if there's time to do that, then there's no reason why we can't give them that time and
Right.
play the
And I
pressure.
think the other thing that I think needs more attention is the letter I part, the instinct
Mhm.
intuition,
Yes. Yes.
because it's a sequence. You take this information in and you process it. But to make a decision that's right for you, you can't just stay up here.
Right.
That needs, yes, you need that information, but it has to inform what your gut is telling you.
Hmm. Absolutely.
And I think that can get, when you're feeling pressured to agree,
Hmm.
or feeling like you ought to.
Hmm.
I think it really is important to check in with your gut, or even the opposite can work too, in the sense of feeling like, I think something's really wrong here, or like, we don't make, we like to think we make decisions on a rational basis. We don't. And
Yeah.
that's because we're human. I mean, that's not a criticism.
Yeah,
We need that accurate information, but the decision we make is actually based on other factors. And then the last thing is to, that I suggest again to sort of lower the temperature in the room if you're going to decline is sort of, it's not just no, it's not now. So
right.
that can
That,
follow a discussion of under what circumstances would you change, would you consider changing, this is a question to ask is like, so what might change here that you think I would need to know in order to, maybe make a different decision? Because that opens up a dialogue and it means that you're not the difficult patient who just has decided she doesn't want our help.
right, right. And we teach that too. We teach not now for the N, just because you might change your mind. There might be things that you encounter as you go along. Like maybe right then you don't want to break your water, but it's a not now because maybe later you're 9 with a bulging bag and that might help, and so like being able
Or
to say not now also keeps the person from feeling like, well, I committed to that before, I can't say yes now because I said no before, you know.
yeah, here's a circumstance that changed is was the my client was having external monitoring and they came in and said, yeah, we're not, it's like we'd like to put an internal monitor on. And she talked it over with her doctor and decided on not now. And
Mhm.
then she got to pushing and they came back in and said, we'd like to put the internal monitor lead on because do you see this tracing? Your baby's heart is slowing down during contractions, but the tracing is disappearing at the bottom. We need the internal monitor to see how low is it going. We need to make a judgment. And she said, yep, sure.
Mhm.
And she actually did end up having they really did what they could. They had her stop pushing and just have the contractions and then try pushing again. And she had a cesarean. There was a knot in the cord.
Mm.
So perfect
Having the data.
example of it wasn't an emergency. Then it was like, yeah, now we really need to know what's going on to make a diagnosis and decide what to do next.
And I love having data for myself, for my kids, for my clients. Like I think just getting the data, I'm not a big, advocate of have a billion cervical changes, but sometimes you got to know if things are happening or not, and sometimes not intermittent monitoring, but continuous monitoring is important. Like sometimes the data is the intervention that can keep you on track, right? Just being reassured that, okay, everything is all right. Everything is moving along in the right direction. But when we're doing it like too much and not for the right reasons, that can spell trouble, which speaking of not for the right reasons, can we talk about the Arrive trial
Oh,
and
yeah.
what's wrong with inducing at 39 weeks? Do you have an opinion on this?
Well, you really have to read the book on this one. Let's see if I can come up with a short version because I
Okay.
document all of this in the book.
Yeah.
So the Arrive trial was conducted in the medical management bubble. What it found was that induction at 39 weeks reduced the cesarean rate and didn't do any harm to newborn outcomes. First of all, why 39 weeks? So 39 weeks is where if you induce at 37 weeks, it's not the same thing if you go into labor on your own, but 37 weeks isn't really quite done yet for most. And you're much more likely to get a baby who ends up in the NICU, at least briefly, because they're having breathing problems.
Right.
Okay. But by the time you get to 39 weeks, that's pretty much dropped off. The difference has disappeared between spontaneous onset and induced labor. So that became the magic number of like, why wait? First of all, this is the medical mentality at work. At this point, we're inducing. This is something I I think I will go off into the weeds and you can bring me back. One of the main points of my book are these reasons to induce labor that I call precautionary induction. It's like there's nothing wrong with you now, but
Right.
something could go wrong if we let the pregnancy keep going. So it started with, oh, we think it's a big baby. And I won't go into the details how that doesn't work, but you get the principle. You've got a group of people, we think it's a big baby, that could be trouble. And if we induce you, we'll reduce the yada, yada, yada. Not true, but that's one group. And then the next group is, oh, your membrane's rupture, but you didn't start labor. So you could get an infection. So we need to induce you and not wait for labor to start on its own because infections are bad things. And never mind why that's faulty thinking. The next one up was we need to induce you at 41 weeks. Because, and again, I looked at the research on it. It does increase cesarean, yada, yada, yada. But so far, you've got at least rationales why some subgroup of people who are otherwise healthy, you think they should be induced because they're being induced for precautionary reasons.
Yeah.
Come to this last one, and you can see that this is where the trajectory would go. The only reason to induce at 39 weeks is because now there's no reason not to. So that's deeply embedded in the medical model of something can go wrong at any moment. So let's get that baby out before that happens. So that's why 39 weeks. But here's the problem. The study was conducted in the medical model bubble in hospitals by obstetricians practicing their medical model.
Right.
And what they found was if you induce at 39 weeks, this is first time mothers, first labors, the cesarean rate was 19%. And if you had expectant management past 39 weeks, but by the way, only up to 41 weeks, the cesarean rate was 22%. Now, here's the thing about expectant management. You hear that and you think, oh, they waited for labor to start. No, they just didn't induce labor at 39 weeks. They might have, labor might have started on its own, or they might have induced. But anyway, they got 19%, and everybody went, hooray! Everybody should be induced at 39 weeks because it doesn't hurt and there's fewer cesareans.
Right.
Okay, so the first thing that argues very much against that is these were ultra low risk first labors. These were people who could have labored at home or in birth centers. They would have qualified. And the cesarean rate was 19%.
Which is high for
Which is
that.
high because there in the book, I give you the range in studies of first labors in birth centers and homes, and the rates ranged, I think, I might be a little bit wrong about this, but I think the rates ranged between 5% and 11%.
I think
Yeah,
that's
something like that. Anyway, substantially lower in all of those studies than the rate. So your next question is, what's wrong with their management? Okay.
yeah.
So, and of course, the logical conclusion is if you can get lower cesarean rates and equally good outcomes by not inducing, then there's something wrong with you, not with this idea of inducing labor. What was wrong? And again, I go into detail in this in the book. There is this idea in the obstetric community that we've solved the problem of inductions being more likely to end in cesarean. They haven't. Okay. So the question rides on what percentage of the expectantly managed population were actually induced. They didn't go into labor on their own. And they didn't answer that in the original ARRIVE trial. But there
Right.
was a follow-up trial that used data from that trial that did answer that question.
I didn't know
And what
that.
I show in the book, and I won't go into detail here, is among those who were induced in the expectant management population, their cesarean rates greatly exceeded the people who went into spontaneous labor in that same week. In other words, it was the inductions overall, like 33% of the expectant, like these so-called expectantly managed um, uh, participants in the trial, like 33% of them were induced.
Wow.
And their rate was double that of the expectantly managed who went into labor spontaneously.
I feel
So
like,
that's what's wrong with the Arrive trial. If you're in that bubble, it was a very well conducted trial. The problem was its premises and the fact that it was inside a box that didn't look outside the box to say, wait a minute, there's a whole system for labor management that gets totally different results from ours.
yeah,
The really sad thing is, I think it is true if you're going to a typical obstetrician who really believes that something can go wrong at any moment and you'll do much better if I induce you at 39 weeks. You might be better off if they do. And again, in the takeaway section, I talk about if that's your situation, what can you do about it if you don't want to agree to be induced. So it's not like I leave anybody hanging with, oh, shoot, I don't have a choice, about my obstetrician, and he's or she is the only game in town, or that
yeah,
my insurance pays for. So what do I do now? So I always want to give people a full picture, and depending on what path they want to take, based on their practical reality, um, they have options.
yeah. Awesome. Well, we are out of time. I wish I could
Ah,
just sit and chat with you all day. But we are out of time. Can you share a little bit more about where to find the book? I will have links and everything in the comments or in the caption underneath the videos, but can you tell us how you'd like us to come and find your book? I know it's on Amazon. It's also
mhm.
on um the nesting spot, right? Is that where we go to
Yeah,
get?
if the simplest thing to do is, okay, I mean, you can go straight to Amazon, but you can also go to my website, hencigoer.com.
Okay,
And if you take the tab that I think is called About the Book, it will give you both books. You can click on one or the other, and it'll take you a page where you find out about that particular book. At the bottom of that page will be your buy option buttons, one of which is Amazon, but there are others as well because not everybody likes to buy from Amazon. So we
right.
have links to other places where you can get the book. And one of the links takes you to our partner, the nesting spot, which is handling our bulk sales because, well, I won't go into the details, but they are handling those sales because they can get the books so that you can get a 20% discount off of any combination of the two, take charge of your birth books. Um, you have to buy 10 copies. You can do 10 of one. You can mix and match, but you'll get a 20% discount off the already low list price of, I think it's $12.99. So that I think it's a real tool for doulas and birth educators to give to their clients. It's a perk of your practice to have this
Mhm.
available. And
Yeah,
and I think it can be a real help both for avoiding confrontation um, with medical staff and and educating your clients and giving them the power to have a conversation with you about what they want, where you're equals.
yeah. And I feel like, honestly, this is such a timely book. I mean, inductions have been around for a minute, but I know since COVID, I'm here in New York City and I don't take a lot of clients, but every single one of my clients has to go through the induction talk with their provider because every single one of them since COVID has been, at 39 weeks, we're going to induce you. And they're like, well, wait a second. No, thank you.
Well,
You
you
know, and
see,
then having to
induction,
negotiate
yep,
negotiate their timeline and everything else.
to be fair, if you look at it well, yeah, I need to be fair. If you look at it from from the busy obstetrician's point of view,
Yeah,
if you
makes
don't
sense.
think it does harm, it has everything going for it. It
Yeah,
allows you to schedule, allows the hospital to schedule, who they need in labor. It means no one's waking you up in the middle of the night.
yeah.
Whatever it has a lot of virtues
Hmm.
if you're starting from the standing point of it doesn't hurt. In fact, you're starting from the standing point of this is
It's
great. I can
beneficial.
reduce the number of cesareans I do. It's a win-win.
Yeah. And I've had clients who choose it just simply because they want their doctor. They don't want to go and just have like the hospital laborist attend them or somebody else from the group. They want their particular doctor. So their doctor says, let's schedule it when I'll be there for you. And they say, yes, please, because they want that provider. So,
And that's their choice, but they need to
yeah.
know what so for example, you might make that choice with the caveat of if my cervix isn't ready,
Mm.
I'm going to say no. I mean, it's like it gives people nuance. It gives people room to make a choice that isn't like I either have to say yes or I have to say no, and neither one of those feels right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Well, Hensi, I am so grateful for you and your work and your books. And thank you so much for being on with me today and answering these questions and just sharing more about you and how you got here and the amazing work you're doing. Tell us more about your next book. What's the next one going to be called?
Oh gosh, I don't know when it'll get done. It's going so much more slowly. It's kind of the capstone. It's going to be labor care. Well, I can't remember the title now, but it's going to be on labor care. What are your best options or something like that? So in this case, each chapter will be on a different topic, like fetal monitoring or rupturing membranes or uh, active management of the placenta, where it's interesting because these are a lot more kind of black and white issues where the evidence really doesn't favor routine use of these. Um, so yeah, I don't know when that'll be out, but that'll be the third and final book. And yeah, so it'll take up everything else, because um, that isn't covered with what is your best option for your best strategy for pain relief and induction. So yeah, but don't hold your breath.
Well, you're an amazing and prolific writer, so I'm just really glad that you
Well,
have written
I'm
what you've
sorry to
written.
interrupt, but where people can go to get the latest and the greatest
Mhm.
is there's a resource center, there's a resource library. It's not the typical blog, it's a resource library on my website that
Okay,
is absolutely free. I think that's one of the links that I gave you.
I
And the
will.
thing about that is it's set up, it's organized by topic. And I write new posts, I write new articles for it pretty much um, every month. And so that's where to go if you just want to send your client there to hunt up something. And I'll tell you what the next one, my November article is going to be on pregnancy, acetaminophen, and autism. Is there a connection? And
That's a good one.
I'm going to delve into the research. And again, give people a means of making sense of that information that they're not getting anywhere else, because anywhere else means they have to follow somebody's opinion about what the research is saying.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is a really good, just that topic right now is, I know so many moms who, feel guilty and then other moms are like, I don't believe it, or, there's just, and also just autism is such a, it's a painful topic
Yeah.
because families are hurting and there's people on both sides, which is like, this is where to place the blame and this is where to place the blame and there is no blame and and parents are caught in the middle of all this. So yeah, it can be a really painful topic that parents of autistic children avoid because of the finger pointing and everything else.
Mm.
So I'm really glad you're going to cover that.
Yeah, if people sign up for my newsletter, they'll get news about when new articles come out and my other stuff right into their email
Okay.
inbox. Thank you so
Well,
much for having me. This has been so much fun.
I think so too. I'm really glad you were here. All right, we'll do this again soon.
Okay.
For now, we'll sign off and thank you so much. And everyone, check out the links in all the information below. I'm going to probably have 4 or 5 different links for you to check out, and definitely sign up for Henci's newsletter so that you can get up-to-date information and keep getting more education and options to share with your clients. And also, as per usual, you can use the link to this blog, but also you can use the links to anything on her website as resources to share with your clients so that they can be educating themselves. So, all right, see you
Take
later.
care.